All that metadata, all of it. Okay, we're ready to go. Perfect. All right, so we are live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Russo, and welcome to the South Florida Tech Podcast, a weekly show where we bring you the awesome, innovative people building our South Florida tech community. Each week, we'll introduce you to one of the Sunshine State's top tech leaders, learn more about who they are, what they do, and have some fun conversation along the way. Our podcast is, of course, presented by the Palm Beach Tech Association, a nonprofit dedicated to building South Florida into a tech hub. And I'm your host, Joe Russo, the CEO thereof. Also want to give a shout out to our sponsor for today, the Delray Beach Startup Sales Message, founded by Chris Breslin. In a time when most people aren't picking up their phones, text messages are definitely the way to go. They have a 99% open rate, and they have built its sales message, a two-way texting platform that gives you a simple dashboard to send, receive, and manage text message conversation on the go. So support a local company. Go to salesmessage.com to learn more about them. With us today on the podcast, I am very excited to have Brian Breslin. He is the OG of the South Florida tech community. He's a native of South Florida. He got his bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia and an MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. He's been an entrepreneur his whole life since 1996 and has been building companies, including a startup that he co-founded called SimCase down in Miami. He is most known in Miami circles as the chairman of Refresh Miami, the largest tech and entrepreneurship group in South Florida, whose goal is to inspire the community to use technology to grow and build startups. Professionally, he is the director of the Launchpad at the University of Miami, where he leads the campus-wide entrepreneurship programs for students, faculty, and alumni entrepreneurs in growing their businesses and launching their ventures. He has been recognized as a leader of the growth of Miami's entrepreneur community into what it is today, and is just overall an awesome fellow who has been a guiding light for me over the years, and I am very happy to have him with me today. So Brian, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So as you said, I'm a Miami native, which is rare here in Miami, especially in the tech circles and startup circles. Yeah. Born and raised in South Florida. Left for undergrad and then again for grad school. But when I left Miami the first time, I never expected to come back. Miami was not something that I didn't think I fit in, right? And so this, for context, this is around the year 2000, and I graduated in 2004 from undergrad. And so when I came back, though, part of it was because I wanted to start something, not necessarily a tech community. I was more interested in starting a business, and then found myself searching for a community of like-minded people. And that's sort of what ended up sort of happenstance and stumbling into creating a community that became Refresh Miami. And so the reality of it was very hard in 2006 and 2005 to connect with anyone in South Florida in tech, because most people were either working at the big companies like Microsoft or Apple Latin America or wherever. And the small independent people didn't necessarily have an outlet. Like during the first .com boom, there'd been a few networking groups, but then they all fizzled away when that crashed. And so Refresh was honestly me looking to make friends, and hang out with people and talk about crazy business ideas, and then it sort of evolved from there. But I've always been an entrepreneur since I can remember, since selling baseball cards and comic cards in elementary school and trading comic books in middle school. And then I started my first actual business in high school, selling banner ads on websites back in the late 90s or mid 90s, and building websites for people and things like that.
Wow, so I didn't know that about you. So you had the side hustles going on since high school.
Yeah. That paid for part of my college. So,
did you do the same work through college as well, of doing websites and paid marketing, things like that?
No, when I got to college, I was spending too much time having a good time and not enough time studying to be able to allocate more time for business endeavors. And so I didn't sort of pick that up again until after college.
So Refresh, you started in 2006, and it wasn't ever meant to be the big thing I think it is today. It definitely transformed into that after helping so many people. But what was it like back in the mid 2000s in South Florida? You know, what obviously in Miami, but maybe kind of like what the region was like as far as the tech community.
Um, so like I said, I mentioned or touched on a little bit earlier, most of the people working in anything tech related were working at the big companies. And so I used to go to things like the Chambers of Commerce or events like that. And basically, if you weren't working at at a big brand name, people weren't really taking you seriously. And and then so independent startups was sort of a crazy thought. No one was really into it, you know. And if you told people you were starting a business, they assumed at the time that it was a real estate business, you know, because that was sort of as the real estate market was getting frothy, you know, and people were starting to do all these subprime loans and buying and flipping 20 houses at a time and getting real estate investment advice from their taxi driver and things like that. Um, and so back then there wasn't much. It was also coincided with the Web 2.0 and accessibility and sort of web standards movements, which were popularizing back then. So there was a sort of um, there were a few tools that were sort of beginning to be um, sort of newly adopted because it was the next generation of uh, sort of programming languages and web platforms that were making web and software development for the web more accessible. And so you didn't have the sort of overhead of things like Java and C++ and things like that that you needed to know in the first generation to build interactive websites. And so there was a lot of interest in learning about those topics. And for me, I was curious about them. I was building websites and building uh, basic software applications on my own, like freelancing back in 2004, 2005. And so I wanted to learn from other people. And so we sort of created this platform where people, in the beginning, it would be every month we'd have a volunteer who volunteered to present on a topic. And we'd order some pizzas and meet at someone's office. And sort of everyone would bring their own beer. It was whoever's office had the biggest fridge was the one we chose for that month. And it was sort of, you'd bring beers and share beers and try other people's beers, and you know, everyone would chip in a few bucks for pizza, or I ended up paying for a ton of the pizza just because I figured it was easier. um, I was discussing, I think at one point with Maria Dirci Russo, who runs Refresh Miami now, how I think I spent probably between $5,000 and $10,000 of my own money on pizza the first few years, just like to keep the sort of momentum going of the organization and stuff. Um, and by organization, I just mean a loosely knit gathering of people, because it wasn't incorporated, it wasn't a formal structure. As far as board, it was like me, Peter Martinez, and Davide Di Cilla were the ones sort of doing a lot of the like legwork just for volunteer purposes. And then we also had a ton of help from Alex de Carvalho early on too, who was at the first Refresh meetup that was at a Starbucks in South Beach in March of 2006.
Wow. So, I mean, you must have been really popular with your pizza guy.
Oh
That's
yeah. I got to the point where I was negotiating with them, and I would say like, look, we're buying 100, or like at that point it was like 50 pizzas a month, and I think at our peak we were buying 200 pizzas a month. And so like we had to call the orders in days in advance so they would know how to make enough dough and have it all ready. And like I don't know how they kept them all warm. Like to me that seems logistically mind-boggling, but then um, they figured it out, you know. And so you know that $1 per pizza discount that they offered went a long way, you know. So
I mean, I think there's a lot of pizza restaurants that have gone very well in the last few weeks, but I have not
Mhm.
heard anybody buying as much pizza as you bought for Refresh. So that's an amazing factoid I'm going to hang on to. Um, so going back to 2006, from there until now, I mean, we're almost at 15 years. I mean, there's been a lot of growth in the tech industry and the tech community, but with that, I think there's been a lot of obstacles too. And I think there are the obstacles as far as any industry goes. I mean, obviously the recession, obviously, some companies, um, they have layoffs. Some companies come in and they hire a bunch of people. And then there's like the political side of, a lot of fish in a small pond maybe. But what do you think the biggest obstacles have been as far as growing Refresh Miami and then growing the entrepreneurial community along with it?
So I think one of the reasons I came back to Miami after college was I wanted to be a bigger fish in a small pond. Like, and I was starting from scratch, because my thought process back then was if I went to San Francisco or New York and I wanted to have any reasonable amount of impact, it would be really, really, really hard, because I wasn't coming from a well-connected family. My family, both my parents are teachers that work at FIU down here, so it's not like we have money. Um, and I think Miami in 2006 and Miami still in 2020, there's still a lot of opportunity to have impact as an individual. The city is still very malleable. Um, but to sort of readdress or focus on what you actually asked, um, I think in the beginning there wasn't much outside interest from non-startups. So there wasn't the ecosystem of companies that benefited from selling to startups, or the ecosystem of people who benefited from sort of investing or identifying startups. And then the economic impact of startups was not even remotely recognized by the city or county level um, players at the time. We're talking about 6 years before Knight Foundation started putting in money um, into anything related to entrepreneurship in South Florida, right? And then I think the DDA and City of Miami started putting some money into things around 2012, and then the county may have put some money in at some point around then too. But I think we're talking about a long time frame, right? And there's been a ton of companies that have come and gone over that time frame. And we've also seen one full recession and recovery, and then another. We're diving headfirst into another one, or worse, right? And so I'm like rambling a little bit, but I think it's interesting to see sort of who's been sort of interested in the scene and who's been from an outside perspective, not the self-interested parties, but the parties that could support and could stand to prop up the ecosystem and things like that. And that's changed over time. Some of those organizations have come and gone. Some of those organizations have shifted their priorities, but if I could, I wish I had access to mentors and people who had done it before in 2006 through 2012. There wasn't really that knowledge base to learn from. I think the only areas where I was able to like pick up best practices here and there were people from other communities that I would meet at South by Southwest every year.
Yeah.
And so that was a very rambling sort of indirect way of answering your question. I don't even know if I touched on all the key parts of it. But
Well, I think that you could talk for days about building and the obstacles to building. I mean, on your
mhm.
last point, I mean, in the work I've done, you were one of my first conversations, and really one of the first websites I went to in thinking, okay, well, how do you build a tech community in Palm Beach, which we've done over the last few years. But you know there were a handful of people, a handful of organizations that were really out there. And now there's a lot of tech organizations, there's a lot of startup organizations. And I think people have realized that impact, and I think the large companies have realized that impact too, because when you have a tech community, let's say in Miami, and you have a large company, OfferUp is one of the new ones that's opening up an office in Miami. they have that
Mhm.
upfront visual of like, hey, there are things going on. There are people really involved. There's a lot of momentum here. There's a lot of activity. So being
Mhm.
a part of that, whatever size company you are, it really adds to the value of the city. It adds to the value of the region. It adds to the value of everybody who's taking part in it. Um, but I can see a lot of obstacles that you and I have both overcome, I think, in our own right in getting that way. But let's maybe pivot that a little bit and say, what's the biggest challenge today? Here we are. It's May. We're in a pandemic, recession, perhaps. We'll see. What's the biggest challenge for the South Florida technology and entrepreneurship community moving forward?
So, I mean, that's it. Again, that's a conversation we can talk about for days on end, right?
Yeah.
Um, I want to step back though. Like one thing you talked about was like the big companies are now um, becoming aware of South Florida as an option, And I think one of the challenges that we've had historically, and it's more of a sort of ingrained in our, like, we weren't starting with the same assets that some of the other communities start with, which is in many of the other successful ecosystems, the people spin out of the big companies and start companies to solve problems where that original big company is their first customer. We don't have that. We don't have that culture um, uh, of sort of local purchasing and local recycling of dollars, and that's something that's going to be a challenge coming in this recession, right? Because some of the biggest employers down here are getting hurt, pummeled by all this,
Mhm.
right? All three cruise lines, like it's going to be tough for anyone to sort of willingly put themselves in a cruise ship and a tin can in the middle of the ocean when it was already a high likelihood of things like legionnaires and food poisoning and things like that before this, and so now it's going to be tough for them to recover and you know get off their footing, or get back on their footing, I should say, you
Yeah.
know um, and those companies employed tens of thousands of people that were either directly or indirectly related to tech roles, and those are the roles you need, and the sort of stable employers you need in order to drive the security, sort of the confidence that people can have in order to spin out their own companies, because um, so many people start companies after they've saved up 6 months of runway or 3 months of runway or whatever it is from their regular day jobs, and they have this itch of this problem that they really want to solve, and then they just dive in deep and do it, right? And now we're going to be running on empty. So I don't know if we'll have that um, sort of that underlying asset, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the angel investors will say, well, we'll just borrow from your friends and family, but like that expects you to have rich friends and family, you know. That assumes you have the same friends that the angel investors do, you know. Um, and so I don't know. I don't think and then also in this sort of scenario, a lot of the friends and family are also running on empty. They're
Yeah.
either victims of layoffs or they are burning through their savings and things like that. So this whole thing is definitely going to set back the startup growth that we were experiencing, you know, um, much more than I would like to admit, or much more than we care to sort of conceptualize.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways I've been thinking about it is like a domino effect almost, where, Royal Caribbean, they were one of the top tech employers, and we're really doing some next generation stuff over there. But, now that the entire hospitality and tourism market has gotten hit hard, and, over
Hmm.
time, that domino effect kind of, it implicates other companies that are directly connected, and then, you know, over time everybody gets affected. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
hoping, we'll be able to get out of this, and those companies can still, survive and thrive at the end of the day. But that impacts everyone in one way or another, and if you're not seeing it today, you could see it tomorrow. So hopefully everybody's, on top of their game with funding and, being sustainable. But the whole thing about you know, having rich investors always helps. There's not a lot of people out there, sadly. Um,
Hmm.
One of the things I think that will make South Florida really, um, sustainable beyond all this is, we have a lot of unique qualities down here, and some of them are pretty obvious. Like there's the Latin American connection. The gateway to Latin America is what really is trying to drive a lot of business growth in Miami. But there's just a lot of other bits and pieces that make us unique, and really a prime community to thrive. But curious where you think there
Hmm.
are some unique parts about us here in South Florida that will really take us beyond this recession and you know allow us to thrive in the long run.
So I think, look, one of the big traits that Miami and South Florida have is we're naturally a very entrepreneurial community, right? A huge percentage of the businesses in South Florida were under 10 people in size, right? We're also used to not having access to capital, right? That's something that we don't have the luxury of compared to some of the other big metro areas, And so we're scrappy, right? And we'll cobble things together. We're obviously going to take a big hit by losing tourism, which is 20% of the GDP of the region, um, and I don't know how quickly travel will rebound, like non-tourist travel, just business travel, especially to Latin America, because no, none of us can predict sort of who's going to recover first and who's not, and also what's like what's the second order effect of some of these countries. So like say one of our big trading partners wipes out coronavirus in their local ecosystem, they're not going to want us to come visit because we're still dealing with this shit show over here,
Mhm.
and so us as their primary customer will still keep impacting their GDPs and all that stuff in their regions, right? And so this is going to have a lot of domino effects, like you mentioned earlier. You know, you might recover, but if your customers are still suffering, you don't have a business.
Mhm.
So we're going to have to learn how to be lean, how to um, sort of be as scrappy as we can. Our startups are going to have to focus as much as possible on understanding cash flow and unit economics. You're not going to be able to sell $1 for 90 cents and hope that you can do it for the rest of the time. Because like it'll rethink how we do things. But like if we're smart about it and if we provide our local businesses, and I'm not talking about just tech and startups, I'm talking about all the businesses that we all rely on, because they're all intertwined. If we start giving them ideas and giving them the tools um, to get back on their feet fast, like it could be some things like giving local restaurants tools to offer direct ordering and local uh, courier unions or something like that in order to do delivery, so they're not paying 40% to Uber Eats or Postmates or some other company, you know, um, or partnering them with other restaurants in order to like fill their capacity of their kitchens, through ghost kitchens and things like that. But from a Latin American perspective, to go back to your original point, I think um, we're hopefully well positioned to be sort of to actually make us the entry point for all the sort of the rebound of Latin America as a region, because Latin America is going to get hit hard, but it's just a matter of rethinking also all these different dynamics, um, I don't know. That's sort of my two
Yeah,
cents
no,
on
I,
it.
I, I mean, my thought process is probably the same as yours. Is there's a lot in the table, and
Yeah.
hopefully it all goes well. Um, Shifting a little bit to you, I mean, you're obviously working with startups every day, not only on your side hustle right now, which is Refresh Miami, the nonprofit, but also in work at UM. Um, what inspires you to get up every day and work with entrepreneurs every single day?
So I think the reason I took the business or the job at UM 3 years ago was I had been volunteering and mentoring students and alumni and like in local businesses for years as a volunteer. And it was something I wish I had access to when I was starting off as an entrepreneur, and I'm a firm believer that like the more smart people you surround yourself with, the more you can learn and the faster you can accelerate your business. And so to me, there always felt like a gap, something that I wish I had had access to. And so I felt compelled to help younger entrepreneurs or newer entrepreneurs minimize their risks and also minimize their pain points, because entrepreneurship is really just a series of experiments, learning from them, adjusting the experiment and repeating, until you get to the right, the optimal outcome you're looking for, you know. Um, and that's something that, so much of my history as an entrepreneur was built on sort of trying, failing, learning, trying, failing, learning. But like, I didn't have the frameworks, or I didn't have the advisors or the mentors to help me speed that up, or to take advantage of trends. I think one thing that like both you and I are going to be sort of pivotal to in South Florida is helping people understand what are the new opportunities coming out of this. How do they adapt their businesses? What are the things that they may not be seeing because they don't have as much exposure to the industry as a whole as we do, or they don't have as many conversations as we do, and that's where a lot of this information lives, in these conversations, and so being able to get paid to do that and to like help people accelerate and grow their businesses was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
It was sort of like the job was meant for me, I guess, like in some shape or form. And so that's why I keep doing it. That's why I stay here in South Florida. Like I could have moved away at any point. I probably made a ton more money, going to work at Facebook or Google or someplace like that. Assuming they would hire someone who, for years, I thought I was unemployable because I was so entrepreneurial or whatever. But I think, yeah, and like that's my way of having a lasting impact, and creating a legacy here in South Florida, is helping others grow their businesses.
So lessons learned: Brian Breslin is employable. He can work.
Apparently, yeah.
No, I know. I feel you on that. I mean, it's it's important that we find the wins in life to really keep us going. But I think the work that you and I have done and will continue to do is more important than ever. One of the things I noticed in the PPP was 501c6 organizations aren't eligible for that. So those include groups like ours, every single chamber of commerce out there, and these are all the people that are trying to help companies, trying to help small businesses. And that was something that I took for like a shoot yourself in the foot type of scenario, where a lot of the people who are set up to help others really can't. So I'm hoping that we can have that kind of a refocus here after all this.
I think there's going to be several more rounds of stimuli, because I think all this money that's being pumped in is going to have burned off, and turned to vapor soon, because the economy is not going to rebound overnight, and I think it behooves us as ecosystem builders and as community organizers and things like that to push for inclusion in these types of packages. I mean, you're more familiar with how the legislative system works and the political machinery of the state and federal level work in order to do these things. And I get why they probably excluded 501c6s versus 501c3s, because it could be seen as sort of political, sort of self-dealing, and so, but like Refresh Miami is a 501c3, which is a different type of nonprofit for the audience. We're not allowed to be engaged in political activity of any kind. But since we're so small and underfunded, we don't have full-time staff, so we didn't qualify for the PPP either. All our staff is either volunteer or independent contractors that are paid sort of here and there. So there isn't a average payroll for the year, right? And the PPP also didn't help for a lot of companies that are relying on independent contractors. And I get it. That's because the government is trying to punish people for saddling individuals with the healthcare and benefits and things like that. In theory, but like look, I'll be political and say that I think that individual companies shouldn't be the source for health insurance for the average individual. I don't think you should be relying on your employer to make sure you can go get a checkup, and that's sort of another variable that's playing into all this too. Think about this: 30 million people now have no health insurance.
Yeah.
Just in the last month.
Yeah, and I
right
agree
when they need it most.
And I agree with you. I mean, there's going to have to be a number of different rounds of this stimulus. And you mentioned that I have a little bit of background to understand the legislative process, but I understand it enough just to know I don't understand it. Because some of the stuff that happens or the process is just so convoluted that the average American can't make two heads of it.
Yeah.
So, but shifting the conversation to use for a second. I'm curious, what are you doing right now? What are you doing with your free time? I know you're a soccer buff, and obviously the soccer's really not being played right now. But
right.
What are you doing to try and make the best of your free time?
So I've been like relearning how to program and taking Codecademy online. I've been doing lots of household sort of chores and things like that were sort of not high priority before, but now that they're more priority, I can tackle them. I've been going for a run, trying to breathe through my face mask, which is not ideal, and I've been, I guess, spending a lot more time on video chat with friends and family, than I ever expected to, but yeah, I mean, look, this is where the time that I thought I would have extra from not having a commute and things like that, it somehow ends up getting filled anyways, by more people also having more time to ask more of everyone, And so I think we're fortunate that we have jobs that we can do from home, and so I'm not complaining about that. I think it's just a matter of sort of just adjusting to all this.
Yeah. And what is your favorite soccer team, by the way?
Well, if they had been able to finally have a home game, I would have said Inter Miami, but I'm still waiting on that. And I'm still also a little salty that they're a Fort Lauderdale team and not a Miami team.
Yeah.
But internationally, I would say my favorite team is Arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
And for no other reason than I liked them when I was a kid and sort of stuck with it,
Yeah, I hear you. I think a lot of people just stick with the big names in the same as like baseball is the Yankees, soccer, you're going with Arsenal or Manchester, something like that. Right. Manchester United, not Manchester City. But the the other thing that's just kind of, I think, crazy right now is, we're spending a lot of time, staying connected to people that we wouldn't otherwise stay connected to. So, I mean, I don't know when the last time is we spoke, actually. And, I was like, hey, we should invite Brian on. I haven't talked to him in the longest time. And, I'm really excited to actually reconnect with you because, I've always kind of looked up to you in this odd way of Brian's done it first. And, and it's weird being geographically disconnected. Now that we're more virtually connected, we can make some of those more meaningful conversations happen.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. With that, we're almost at time for the podcast, but I was curious on an ending point. What call to action and or what advice you would have for the South Florida tech community today?
So I think one thing that people need to start, that I'd like everyone to sort of take to heart, is do some research, look to see who's working on things that are interesting to you, and reach out to them and volunteer and ask them how you can contribute. Because we get too much repetitive cycle of people trying to start something new on their own to solve a problem that someone else is already tackling rather than collaborating, and it ends up sort of fragmenting all the effort. And we need people to be collaborating more if we want these things to succeed and to sustain, because it's a Herculean effort for any one or two small underfunded organizations to try and build this community. But working together, I think that we can all accomplish something great, and I think now more so than ever is the time to focus on, some of the things that the startup ecosystem benefits us all, which is, job creation and things like that. There's a few thousand people in tech who are laid off just in South Florida, probably tens of thousands actually, and the only way they're going to get employed is if we all work together and help them find new jobs,
Yeah.
So.
And, for that, I've talked to Maria a little bit on that too. And we're collaborating a little bit and
Good.
trying to figure it out. But, I think there's so big of a need right now that it takes like 10 Brians and 20 Marias and 17 Joes and whoever else to really kind of fill the need over there. So hopefully we can keep doing work and, people keep supporting us and find the sense in their back pocket to keep this up. But with that, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. Also, shout out to our producing sponsor, Media Ops. They're a local tech company down here in Boca Raton. They're the premier global media platform for technical communities like DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal. Great company run by Alan Schimmel. So thank you for them for supporting our podcast and helping us produce it. If you're interested more in what we do at Palm Beach Tech, you can go to palmbeachtech.org. We have memberships. You can click Get Involved and see some of the ways that you can be engaged in our community. And of course, if you're in Miami listening to this, go to refreshmiami.com. There's some really awesome things that they do throughout the year, a lot of great events, and they do have memberships there as well. So you can check them out and get involved with Refresh. But Brian, thank you so much, man, for everything you've always done and always been a good ear to bend. I hope everything keeps going well with you, man, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Likewise, thanks for having me. Hopefully in a few months, maybe we'll do this one in person again.
Yes, with beer.
When we get to that point. Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
All right. I'll talk to you later, man.
Take care.